It's super easy to predict the question here. We know this is about punctuation because obviously that's the only thing that's changing between the choices. But, triage, right? Like think about a priority here and go through these rules one at a time. Don't just look at everything at once, right? This is a strategy we use all the time on the SAT because they try to cram a lot of stuff into one question. So narrow your focus. Take it one piece at a time. The first thing I notice, and probably the easier rule since, dashes, semicolons, colons, those are hard punctuation marks. The one that's not that hard is apostrophes. There are clear-cut rules about when we use them and when we don't, right? An apostrophe indicates possession. So, are the reporters owning anything? Let's read the sentence. It is not difficult to understand why a cash-strapped, understaffed publication might feel pressure to cut teams of investigative reporters. Their work is expensive and time-consuming. No, there's no need for an apostrophe here. It's just reporters, right? They're just reporters. That's what we're talking about. The reporters don't own anything. It's not like it's the reporter's work. They're separated, right? The word there is already kind of doing that possession. So there's no reason for an apostrophe here. So that gets rid of A, and that gets rid of D. And now we have a much easier punctuation choice than we had before. This is why this is so important, because now we can choose between basically kind of like a run-on kind of situation, right? A comma is a very soft pause, a very weak punctuation mark. A colon is a much harder punctuation mark. And so we can think about sentence structure and see, well, how are we combining these two pieces, right? What are their functions? So again, let's read. It is not difficult to understand why a cash-strapped, understaffed publication might feel pressured to cut teams of investigative reporters. Right there, I could put a period, because that's a complete thought, a complete sentence. So all of this, it's long, but it's a sentence. So what comes next? Because I've only got either a comma or a colon there. So what's the next piece? Their work is expensive and time-consuming. That is also a sentence, right? That could stand alone with a capital T and a period at the end. And so this is a problem. A comma would create a run-on sentence. So we need the colon. Maybe you wouldn't write it there, but we have to put it because it's the only punctuation mark left that would connect these two ideas in a grammatically correct way, right? So a colon, in order to use one, we are required to have a sentence, a complete sentence before the colon. Afterwards, we have some flexibility. We can have a complete sentence. We could also have a list, or we could even just have one word. We have flexibility, but the key is that first part must be a sentence. That is true. And then the second part is a sentence, but that's with just our flexibility with the colon. The comma, though, we need something more. We cannot just join two sentences together with a comma. We need a conjunction. We need, something else. Now, the reason it's so important to narrow your focus and take on the easier choices first, the easier rules, is that if we had ignored the apostrophe, choices A and D are also right in a sense. We could join these two sentences together with a semicolon or with a dash. The dash is correct, the semicolon is correct, the colon is correct. All three of those are valid ways to connect two sentences with punctuation. So we focused on the easier thing, and then it meant that later on our decision was easier on the harder thing, right? Run-ons are hard. Sentence structure is hard. So I'd rather get rid of some of the bad answers, the noisy choices first, and, narrow my focus, have an easier decision for the harder rule. That's really important, and so that's, another part of predicting the question is just kind of knowing what you're up against and being able to look at those choices and say, okay, they're testing this rule, or in this case, these two rules, and pick the priority. Pick the one that's easier to do first, so that way you can get rid of some bad choices and make the hard rule easier to solve.